Welcome to the Adams County Arts Council in downtown Gettysburg. My name's Laurie Zier, and I'm Interim Director of the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. At the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, learning is at the heart of everything that we do. And tonight, you're going to learn a lot about the Civil War and its musical history. We've been working for the last few months with the Adams County Library System to bring this program to you to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. But first, a big thank you to our sponsor. It's the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services and our state partners, the Pennsylvania Heritage Foundation, as well as the State Library of Pennsylvania, for making this event possible. Also, I want to thank Wendy Allen for the tremendous artworks that you see behind me of the portraits of Lincoln. Please join us tonight on a musical journey through the Civil War with Michael Lasser, who is known as a walking encyclopedia of American song, and performers Cindy Miller and Alan Jones. The trio will present "We Are Coming, Father Abram, Lincoln and the Songs of the Civil War." Please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you. Thank you, and good evening. It's good to be here. It's impossible to separate Lincoln from the songs of the Civil War. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Eventually, you will come back to Abraham Lincoln because the themes of the war, the themes of the songs of the war are the themes of his time, his life, and his presidency. He was never an abolitionist, and yet he came to have a profound commitment to human freedom. So abolitionism is where we start. He was not an abolitionist, but abolition was inseparable from what was going on and inseparable from what Lincoln was hearing as he approached his presidency. In 1830, Daniel Decatur Emmett, a performer and songwriter, wrote a song that you all know. It's called Old Dan Tucker. It's still sung. A decade later, the Hutchinson family singers, New Englanders from New Hampshire, who were great abolitionists, changed the words. They changed Emmett's words to the Hutchinson's words, and they called their song "Clear the Track." "Clear the Track" is one of the great abolitionist anthems. And what it does is use the image of something that was new and exciting, a railroad engine, a locomotive, coming down the track, something unstoppable to represent the onrushing force of emancipation. Most abolitionist songs were about slavery, about the horrors of slavery. But this song is about freedom.
Oh, the car Emancipation rides majestic through the nation,
bearing on its train the story, liberty, our nation's glory.
Roll it along, roll it along, roll it along through the nation, freedom's car, emancipation. Roll it along, roll it along, roll it along through the nation, freedom's car, emancipation. Men of various predilections, pride and run in all directions.
Merchants, editors, physicians, lawyers, priests, and politicians. Get out the way! Get out the way! Get out the way! Every station, clear the track for emancipation. Get out the way! Get out the way! Get out the way! Every station, clear the track for emancipation.
See the people run to meet us at the depot, thousands greet us.
I'll take seats with exultation in the car, emancipation. Huzzah, huzzah! Huzzah, huzzah! Huzzah, huzzah! Emancipation soon will bless our happy nation. Huzzah, huzzah! Huzzah, huzzah! Huzzah, huzzah! Emancipation soon will bless
a happy nation.
In the way in which I've already said, that song is atypical of abolition songs, but it was also typical in that many of those songs, and by the way, they all disappear as of 1860. Once the war starts, the emancipation music disappears and songs become much more militant, much more militaristic, patriotic, as you would expect. But the abolition songs were often set to familiar melodies, to songs people already knew. And the lyrics were very repetitive. Could you hear how much repetition there was? Because you would go to a rally and people would sing the song, and by the end of the evening, thanks to the familiar melody and the repetitive lyric, you knew the song too, and you could help to spread not the song, but its sentiment more broadly, because this was very much a morally charged political movement. Now, many of the songs of the time, we're moving past emancipation, many of the songs of the Civil War fit into one of several categories, and as you would expect, they overlap within individual songs. Homesickness, motherhood, death, and patriotism. If you're old enough to know the songs of World War II, you know that death almost never appears in those songs. But the songs of the Civil War were filled with it. Perhaps it was the fratricidal conflict. Perhaps it was the sheer number of those killed. Almost no one's family was not affected. 600,000 of us died in the Civil War. Check that against the population of the entire United States, both sides at the time, and you will be horrified when you compare it and say, put it in terms of the number of Americans in World War II, and then do the multiplication. You will be horrified by the percentage that died in the Civil War. As a result, many of these songs also take on a spiritual dimension that offers consolation in the midst of grief, because the grief truly was everywhere. Families on both sides would have understood a lyric that turns an image of welcome and domesticity and comfort into an image of grief and then hope. Death appears in songs as a dominant theme for the remainder of the 19th century. They're not war songs, they're not about death in war, but death becomes the irreplaceable subject of song in the second half of the 19th century. And it begins, obviously, in the Civil War. No one was untouched.
We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. When a year ago we gathered, joy was in his mild blue eyes, but a golden cord is severed under hopes in ruin lie. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. At our fireside sad and lonely, often will the bosom swell at remembrance of the story, how our noble Willie fell, how he strove to bear our banner through the thickest of the fight, and uphold our country's honor in the strength of manhood's might. We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe an evening
In September of 1859, that same Dan Emmett who wrote Old Dan Tucker had a line running through his head. It was a line for a song, and he couldn't shake it, and that's as good a beginning as you get when you're writing a song. The line was, "I wish I was in Dixie." And he couldn't shake it, so he obviously wrote a song. The resulting song, Dixie, or Dixieland, was so popular that Lincoln had it played at his inaugural in 1860. That is, don't think of it as the Confederate anthem. There was no Confederacy. Dan Emmett was best known as one of the founders of the minstrel show back in the 1830s. So this was a song that would have fit very well into a minstrel program. He was a professional performer and songwriter going about his work. It became popular. Lincoln liked it. He had it played at his inaugural. When the war ended, a crowd, I jumped 5 years. When the war ended, a crowd gathered outside the White House, and the Marine Band formed, and Lincoln came out to say a few words. And he said to the crowd that they had added a fine song by right of conquest. And as a conciliatory gesture, he asked the band to play Dixie. Now, you need to know, well, I want to extend something you do know. You know it became the anthem of the Confederacy, but not the song as you and I know it. New words were put to it. Unfortunately, Albert Pike, about whom I know nothing except to tell you he wrote the words that the Southern side sang during the war. Albert Pike may have been a splendid man. He may have played nice with the other children. He may have been good and kind and generous. But I can tell you that he was one rotten songwriter. You are about to hear the words that he wrote in 1861, in effect, to make it into the national anthem. The very next year, in 1862, George Frederick Root, you don't know who that is, do you, most of you? Do you know who George Frederick Root was? Do you? Good for you. If I say name a 19th century songwriter, what are you going to, American, what are you going to tell me? Stephen Foster. End of conversation for most people. And that's fine. He was a great songwriter, our first great songwriter. But there were others, and George Frederick Root was one of them. In 1862, Lincoln put out a call for volunteers, and it stirred the country. And when George Root heard of the call, he immediately wrote a new song to encourage people to enlist. Its effect on the Union side was electric, because the Army, remember, had taken a series of beatings. They weren't defeats, they were beatings. The Army was dejected, the Army was dispirited. It was led by a man who was not very good at lifting fallen spirits. His name was George McClellan, who liked doing everything but fighting. And so Root put out this song that lifted the spirits of the Army, so much so that Lincoln wrote to Root, "You have done more than 1,000 generals and 1,000 orators." So 2 songs, but first, Mr. Pike's words to Dixie.
Southrons, hear your country call you, up less worse than death befall you. To arms, to arms, to arms. In Dixie, lo, all the beacon fires are lighted. Let all hearts be now united. To arms, to arms, to arms. In Dixie, advance the flag of Dixie. Hurrah, hurrah. For Dixie's land we take our stand, and live or die for Dixie. To arms, and conquer peace for Dixie. To arms, and conquer peace for Dixie. Hear the northern thunders mutter, northern flags and south winds flutter. To arms, to arms, to arms. In Dixie, send them back your fierce defiance. Stamp upon the cursed alliance. To arms, to arms, to arms. In Dixie, advance the flag of Dixie. Hurrah, hurrah. For Dixie's land we'll take our stand, and live or die for Dixie. To arms, and conquer peace for Dixie. To arms, and conquer peace for Dixie.
We are marching to the field, boys, we're going to the fight, shouting the battle cry of freedom, and we bear the glorious stars for the Union and the right, shouting the battle cry of freedom, the Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitor, up with the star, for we're marching to the field, boys, going to the fight, shouting the battle cry of freedom. If we fall amid the fray, boys, we'll force them to the last, shouting the battle cry of freedom. And our comrades brave will bear us as they go rushing past, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitor, up with the star, for we're marching to the field, boys, we're going to the fight, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
You know, we've so apotheosized Lincoln that we sometimes forget that he was, in fact, a politician, and often a losing politician, and yet he gathered to himself a set of political skills that were quite extraordinary. He was a first-rate and very tough, and those are synonymous to a certain degree, politician. As somebody said, politics ain't beanball. Lincoln and Liberty was the most popular campaign song of the 1860 campaign. It portrays Lincoln as you would expect him to be portrayed. A Westerner, a rail splitter, a man who has served his country, someone who is honest. But he is also, in the song, the chieftain who will lead us to the great Reformation. And that word should echo down over the next 5 years. At least implicitly, I'll come back to it before we're done. Reformation, because he's on the side of the freeing of the slaves, even though the song is from 1860. Think about how early it is. You know, when you hear these songs and their sentiments, you really do have to keep track of when in the course of these 5 years they occur. Are they simply reflecting what people have come to believe, or are they seeing something before it takes form in the public imagination? With hindsight, we can see that the call to Reformation is already beginning to perceive Lincoln as some sort of prophetic figure, and that becomes very important in these songs. Lincoln knew by 1864 that he was in trouble politically. The war was going badly. McClellan was running against him. His own general was running against him with a promise of making peace and restoring the Union as it had been. The emergence of Grant and a series of very convincing and very bloody victories turn the tide against the South and ensure Lincoln's re-election. The second campaign song you're going to hear is from 1864, and it sounds a new note, an optimistic note for Lincoln's victory in his second presidential campaign. Here are Lincoln and Liberty, and my favorite title, not the best song you're going to hear tonight, but my favorite title, Abraham the Great and General Grant, his mate.
Hurrah for the choice of the nation, our chieftain so brave and so true. We'll go for the great Reformation, for Lincoln and liberty too. We'll go for the son of Kentucky, the hero of Hoosierdom through, the pride of the suckers so lucky, for Lincoln and liberty too. They'll find what by felling and mauling our railmaker statesmen can do. For the people are everywhere calling for Lincoln and liberty too. Then up with a banner so glorious, the star-spangled red, white, and blue. We'll fight till our banner's victorious, for Lincoln and liberty too. For Lincoln and liberty too.
Oh, the politician crew, they don't know what to do, since freedom in the South is plainly dawning. They fear that this short night of a little blood and fight will bring us all out right in the morning. Then let us work away and care not what they say, for freedom in the South is plainly dawning. With Abraham the Great and General Grant his mate, they'll bring us all out right in the morning. I think Uncle Abe's the man who another term can stand the Rebs and Copperheads with them scorning. And in 1865 we'll elect him if alive, for he'll bring us all out right in the morning. Then let us work away and care not what they say, for freedom in the South is plainly dawning. With Abraham the Great and General Grant his mate, they'll bring us all out right in the morning.
Now, I mentioned before that George Root wrote Battle Cry of Freedom in response to Lincoln's call for volunteers. This next song was written for the same purpose in response to that same call. And more than any other song I know from the time, it anticipates Lincoln's new vision of what America will be. Remember that in many ways, the Civil War is the second American Revolution, and the Gettysburg Address is the second Declaration of Independence. Lincoln, in effect, reinvents the nation. In the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln, in those 10 minutes of ignored chat, I mean, he really had no effect, as you know, until after. What Lincoln does in the Gettysburg Address is transform American patriotism, and at that time, a highly militarized American patriotism, into the civic religion that we've embraced ever since. And I guarantee you, when you get home tonight and flip on the television set, if you listen with that set of antennae aquiver, you will hear references to Lincoln's civic religion, to his reinvention of America, that we take for granted. It's become part of our American DNA. The song links enlisting with a great moral crusade. It's not just patriotism. It's a great moral crusade. And it portrays Lincoln not only as a great political leader, but it elevates him to the level of a great guiding force of biblical stature. The song is a hymn, an anthem, and a marching song, all in one.
Father Abram, 300,000 more from Mississippi's winding stream and from New England's shore. We leave our plows and workshops, our wives and children dear, with hearts too full for utterance, with but a silent tear. We dare not look behind us, but steadfastly before. We are coming, Father Abram, 300,000 more. We are coming, our union to restore. We are coming, Father Abram, with 300,000 more. We are coming, Father Abram, with 300,000 more. There's blood upon your garments, there's guilt upon your soul, for the host of ruthless soldiers you let loose without control. Your dark and wicked doings a God of mercy sees, and the wail of homeless children is heard on every breeze. You may call arms to aid your stinking cause and substitute your vulgar jokes for liberty and laws. We are coming, our union to restore. We are coming, Father Abram, with 300,000 more. We are coming, Father Abram, with 300,000 more.
Can you hear how a year before the Gettysburg Address, it begins the process of what the Gettysburg Address is about without knowing it, without knowing it. The man was not prescient, he was serendipitous, or as some might prefer, it was dumb luck, but he got it done. So what Lincoln does is complete the Founding Fathers' work. Remember that they slough off the question of slavery because they have to choose whether to have a union or whether to solve the problem of slavery, and they choose to have a union. That's the grand compromise that they work out. But the abolition of slavery and the affirmation of union as one nation indivisible, possessing a new birth of freedom, is the completeness of the founders' work that Lincoln gives us, and its promise appears in that song. Clearly, we now derive more from the Civil War than from the American Revolution. The themes of the Civil War feel real to us. The American Revolution feels distant. We think we do, but we don't even know what Jefferson meant when he used words like freedom and liberty, because they're quite different from our meanings. We simply take our ignorance and impose it on the Declaration. They use those words quite differently. So we derive more from the Civil War, but Lincoln derived from a figure that we all do, in fact, draw upon, George Washington. He feels remote, but he continues to occupy some sort of mythic place for us. The first founding, the embodiment, the apotheosis of the first founding of the nation. George Washington, a portrayal of George Washington hung in Abraham Lincoln's Springfield home.
Come, happy people, oh come, let us tell the story of Washington and Lincoln. His story's pages can never excel the story of Washington and Lincoln. Down through the ages the anthem shall go, bearing the honors we gladly bestow, till every nation and language shall know the story of Washington and Lincoln, who gave us independence on continent and sea, who saved the glorious Union and set a people free. This is the story, oh happy are we, the story of Washington and Lincoln.
Parents to children shall tell with delight the story of Washington and Lincoln. Free-born and freedmen together recite
The story of Washington and Lincoln.
Earth's weary bondmen shall listen with cheer. Tyrants shall tremble and traitors shall cheer, when in its fullness of glory they hear the story of Washington and Lincoln, who gave us independence
Washington and Lincoln.
There are a couple of things I want to point out to you. I want to step back a little bit and take a kind of overview for a moment. First of all, songs are highly selective. Even 19th century songs are short, even if they have 5 or 6 or 7 verses. They're much shorter than a history of anything. They're highly selective. There are certain kinds of truths you tell in songs and certain kinds of truths you don't tell in songs. The horror of the war is not in these songs. The blood, the fighting, the death. The aftermath of death is the grief, the mourning, the empty chair, the vacant chair. That's there, but not how that person died. There are certain things songs don't lend themselves to. And it's not so much that the songs are sanitized as that they're aimed at a particular public. They're aimed at the people back home. The soldiers who were fighting at Bull Run did not have a store where they could stop off and buy sheet music. These songs are, during wartime are generally aimed at the people back home. The second point I want to make to you is that if you follow the songs as we've done them, you see a portrait of Lincoln not only emerging, but evolving. At the beginning, he's good old Abe, someone we know, someone we could hang out with, somebody who did an honest day's hard work, split rails, got his hands dirty in some military service. He's from out west. He's one of those Western Americans. He's a real guy. But as it evolves, he becomes, one of the things I think that makes Lincoln amazing to us is that the more we know about him, the more real he becomes. He never becomes disembodied. And yet, in certain ways, the songs lift him. The songs elevate him. The songs link him not only to biblical prophecy, but also to great American heroes. He is on one hand Father Abraham, and on the other hand we utter his name in the same breath as we say Washington. And so there is that evolution over time, and it has one more step to take, because after his death, his assassination, his brutal murder, obviously many songs appear, many lamentations appear in the immediate aftermath of Lincoln's death. He was often vilified during his presidency, but with his death, he becomes a martyr and a saint. Does anyone know what day of the week he was shot on? Friday. Any particular? Good Friday. And so he was shot on Good Friday, and he died, of course, on Easter Sunday. Not surprisingly, in the sermons that Sunday and the following Sunday, both Jesus and Lincoln died to redeem the sins of their people. This new hymn was sung at Lincoln's funeral.
All our land is draped in mourning, hearts are bowed and strong men weep, for our loved, our noble leader sleeps his last, his dreamless sleep. Gone forever, fallen by a traitor's hand, remaineth, our redeemed, beloved land. When from mountain, hill, and valley to their homes our brave boys come, with welcome notes we greet them, song and cheer and pealing drum. When we miss our loved ones fallen, when to weep we turn aside, then for him our tears shall mingle. He has suffered, he has died. Farewell, Father, friend and guardian, thou hast joined the martyr band, but thy glorious work remaineth, our redeemed, beloved land.
In 1862, the same year as Battle Cry of Freedom and We Are Coming, Father Abram, Abraham Lincoln signed a bill for the construction of a railroad between Missouri and the Pacific. That's an interesting fact, I suppose. Think about, and the next year they drove the first spike, 1863. The building of the Transcontinental Railroad began, and we all sit back and say, oh, that's nice, people could take the train. Think about it. Put yourself in 1943, and Franklin Roosevelt goes on the radio to announce that we will not have as many tanks, airplanes, destroyers, rifles, or bullets next year because we're working on this invention for after the war. It's called television, and you'll really like it. We'd have impeached him. We wouldn't have tolerated it. Lincoln, in the middle of the Civil War, turns to the building of the railroad. What's going on? Now, if you know anything about Lincoln, you know that he was involved in the railroad for a long time before this year. But there's more to it than that, I would suggest to you. So between 1863 and 1869, we're building the thing. And we have to line it up in Promontory Point, although I do have this vision of the two sides kind of doing this so they can find one another out there. A railroad now moves across the open prairie. For the first time, we can ride the railroad across the country. So what? We can now ride the railroad across what we perceive to be a single continental nation. What Lincoln fought to preserve, to reaffirm, and to make permanent, we could now experience day by day. It was no longer a noble idea. It was a noble idea brought within the ken of every single American who could buy a ticket on that bumpy, really quite dreadful railroad. In 1869, the year in which the railroad completed the building, there came a song. Now, it's not about Lincoln, but it embodies the point that I've just made. And if you listen to the lyric, you will hear a particular stanza, and I'll try to remember to point to Cindy when she gets to it. That is the embodiment of Lincoln's belief in the Union, his commitment to the railroad, and the way in which one becomes the expression of the other. Oh, I have it in my notes. I'm going to read it to you. The song takes us across the prairie and the mountain until it reaches what it calls the land of gold. It sings what it calls, and here's the quote to listen for in the song: "A wondrous story no nation sang before, a continental chorus that echoes either shore." Within the song, the train creates for each of us the nation that Lincoln re-envisioned and articulated.
All aboard! All aboard!
The hissing breath of the iron steed proclaims his wish to be quickly freed. And soon as the stroke from the bell we hear, he springs at the touch of his engineer, and away we glide o'er prairies wide, through verdant vales and mountain dales, to the last great chain which is striven in vain with the lightning palace train. Forgetting far Atlantic and midway scenes romantic, we scale the peaks gigantic which guard the land of gold. Here silver rills are leaping, here lovely lakes are sleeping, and snow-clad granites keeping their watch of years untold. We sing a wondrous story no nation sang before, a continental chorus that echoes either shore. We sang it on the summit, we sing it on the plain. We've climbed the Grand Sierras with a lightning palace train, with a lightning palace train. Timbered roofs unending, from winter snows defending, through canyons wild descending, to the city of the plain. We leave the scenes terrific, we pass the fields prolific, and view the broad Pacific, the golden gated main. We sing a wondrous story no nation sang before, a continental chorus that echoes either shore. We sang it on the summit, we sing it on the plain. We've climbed the Grand Sierras with a lightning palace train, with a lightning palace train.
We're going to close with one more song. What began as a war to preserve the Union had become a moral crusade to preserve the Union and end slavery. One did not replace the other. We added it on. They became, in effect, one thing with two names. This song remains as wonderful as these other songs are, and I think my personal favorite is probably that one and We Are Coming, Father Abram. That one and what I call the train song, because I never remember the whole title. But this one truly does remain the great anthem of Lincoln's civic religion, in which this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. And we're doing it for two reasons. One, because you can't do a program of Civil War songs and not. And second of all, because it truly is what I've just said about it, the battle cry of freedom.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth a trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Everyone sing with us.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on, marching on.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
The Pennsylvania Humanities Council wants to thank Michael Lasser, Cindy Miller, and Alan Jones for this unique learning experience. And thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to our partner, the Adams County Library System, and our host, the Adams County Arts Council. Thank you.